I need to tell you what happened at my wife's funeral, but nothing will make sense unless you understand how I got to that moment. My name is Daniel. I'm 34 years old and I live just outside Seattle, Washington. I work as a software engineer for a marketing company downtown. It's not the most exciting job in the world, but it pays our bills and keeps me busy during the week. I never thought I'd be sharing this story with anyone, especially strangers, but keeping it locked inside feels like I'm carrying a rock in my chest that gets heavier every single day. I was married to Elena. She wasn't just my wife. She was the person who made me want to get out of bed in the morning. She was the one who knew exactly how I liked my coffee and would leave little sticky notes in my lunch bag with drawings of cats wearing hats. We met in college when I was 22 and she was 21. I was studying computer science and she was studying art and history. We met at this boring school event where they were giving out stale crackers and cheap wine that tasted like vinegar. I saw her standing by herself looking at a sculpture on the wall, and I walked over because I didn't know anyone else at the party either. We started talking about that sculpture even though neither one of us knew anything about art. We just made stuff up and laughed about how silly we sounded. We talked for 3 whole hours that night. After that, we hung out almost every single day. Elena had this special way of making regular boring things feel exciting. Going to buy groceries became like going on a treasure hunt. Washing dishes turned into a game where we'd race to see who could finish their side first. She'd play music really loud and we'd dance around our apartment while I tried to match up socks from the laundry basket. We used to stay up really late at night talking about what our lives would be like when we got older. We wanted to travel to Greece and walk through old cities with white buildings and blue roofs. We wanted to buy a cottage near the mountains where we could have cookouts with our friends on the weekends. We wanted to have kids, maybe 3 of them. We'd already picked out names and everything. That was our plan. That was what our life was supposed to look like. But I've learned that things don't always work out the way you think they will. About 4 years after we got married, Elena started feeling really tired all the time. At first we thought maybe it was just because of her job at the museum. She worked long hours and would come home completely worn out. She'd fall asleep on the couch before we even finished dinner. Then she started losing weight even though she was eating the same amount of food as always. Her skin didn't look right anymore. It looked kind of gray instead of her normal healthy color. She started getting really bad headaches that wouldn't go away no matter what medicine she took. I kept telling her she needed to go see a doctor, but she kept saying she was fine. She said it was probably just stress from work and she didn't want to waste money on a doctor's visit when nothing was really wrong. I didn't push hard enough at first. I should have. Finally, after about 2 months of watching her get worse, I called the doctor myself and made an appointment. I told her I was taking her whether she liked it or not. I drove her to the doctor's office on a Thursday afternoon. I remember it was raining outside. The doctor looked at her and asked a bunch of questions. Then he said he wanted to run some tests. So we went to get blood drawn and she had to get some scans done. Then we had to wait. We sat in that waiting room for what felt like forever. The lights were really bright and everything smelled like cleaning spray. I held Elena's hand the whole time. Her hand felt cold. A week later, we had to go back to hear the results. When we walked into the doctor's office, I could tell something bad was about to happen just from the look on his face. He asked us to sit down and then he said words I'll remember for the rest of my life. He said Elena had cancer. Advanced cancer. It was aggressive, which meant it was moving fast through her body. He said there were some treatments they could try, but he wanted us to understand that this type of cancer was very hard to treat. Most people with this kind don't make it. He said if we were lucky, Elena might have 12 to 18 months left. Maybe a little more, maybe less. There was no way to know for sure. Elena squeezed my hand so hard I thought my bones might break. Couldn't breathe right. The room felt like it was spinning and standing still at the same time. The doctor kept talking about chemotherapy and specialists and treatment plans, but I couldn't hear him anymore. My ears were ringing. All I could think about was that this couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening to us. Not to Elena. She was only 30 years old. We were supposed to have 50 more years together. We were supposed to grow old and watch our kids grow up and become grandparents someday. But the doctor kept talking and Elena kept squeezing my hand and I realized this was really happening. Our whole future, everything we'd planned and dreamed about, All of it was disappearing right in front of my eyes. I looked at Elena and she looked back at me and I could see she was scared. I was scared too. I didn't know what we were going to do. I didn't know how we were going to get through this. All I knew was that our lives had just changed in ways we couldn't take back. When we left the doctor's office that day, everything looked different. The rain was still falling. Cars were still driving past. People were still walking down the sidewalk talking on their phones. But for us, the whole world had shifted. We got in the car and I started driving home, but I had to pull over after a few blocks because I couldn't see through my tears. Elena put her hand on my shoulder and said, "We'll get through this together." I wanted to believe her. I tried to believe her. But deep down, I was terrified we wouldn't. We started Elena's treatment the very next week. The doctors said we didn't have time to waste. I went with her to every single appointment. Every one. I didn't care if I had to miss work or cancel plans or stay up all night. Nothing mattered except being there with her. We'd sit in these big chairs in the chemotherapy room and Elena would have needles in her arm connected to bags of medicine hanging on metal poles. The medicine dripped slowly into her veins. It was supposed to kill the cancer cells, but it made Elena really sick too. I'd hold her hand during the treatments and we'd try to talk about normal stuff like what we wanted for dinner or what show we should watch later. But it was hard to think about normal things when everything felt so wrong. After the treatments, Elena would feel terrible. Her stomach would hurt and she'd throw up a lot. I'd help her to the bathroom and hold her hair back. I'd get her water and crackers and anything else she needed. At night, when the pain kept her awake, I'd stay up with her. Sometimes we'd watch old movies we'd seen 100 times before. Sometimes we'd just sit there not saying anything while I rubbed her feet or her back, trying to make her feel even a little bit better. There were some good days mixed in with all the bad ones. Days when Elena woke up feeling strong enough to take a short walk around our neighborhood. Days when she'd smile at me across the breakfast table and for just a second it felt like before. Like she wasn't sick. Like we were just a normal couple having a normal morning. We'd cook simple dinners together, just pasta or soup, nothing fancy. We'd sit on our couch and she'd lean her head against my shoulder while we watched whatever was on TV. I tried to remember every detail of those moments. The way her hair smelled like the lavender shampoo she always used. The sound of her laugh when something funny happened on the show. The way her hand felt when I held it. I knew these moments wouldn't last forever and I wanted to hold on to them as long as I could. But as the months went by, the good days came less and less often. The bad days got worse. Elena lost more weight. She was already thin, but she got so skinny I could see her bones through her skin. Her beautiful auburn hair started falling out in clumps because of the chemotherapy. She'd find it on her pillow in the morning or in the shower drain. One day she asked me to just shave it all off because watching it fall out was too hard. So I did. I sat her in a chair in our bathroom and used clippers to shave her head. She cried while I did it and so did I, but I didn't let her see. Walking from our bedroom to the kitchen became hard for her. She'd get out of breath just going down the hallway. She needed help doing things she used to do without thinking, like getting dressed or taking a shower. We stopped talking about the future. We stopped making plans for next month or next year. We just focused on today, on right now, on getting through this moment. Because we both knew, even though we didn't say it out loud, that we were running out of time. I took a leave from work so I could be home with her all day every day. My boss said I could have as much time as I needed. Money didn't seem important anymore. What was I going to do with money if Elena wasn't there? Nothing mattered except being together for whatever time we had left. When Elena couldn't walk up the stairs to our bedroom anymore, we moved a bed into the room downstairs. I slept on a cot right next to her bed so I could hear if she needed me during the night. She needed me a lot. Sometimes for water. Sometimes because she was in pain. Sometimes just because she was scared and didn't want to be alone. Elena's sister Rachel started coming over a lot to help out. She'd bring groceries or meals she'd already cooked, so I wouldn't have to worry about it. She'd sit with Elena for an hour or two so I could take a shower or go outside and get some fresh air. Rachel and Elena had always been really close. They talked on the phone almost every day and sent each other messages constantly. Watching them together made me feel happy and sad at the same time. Happy because I could see how much they loved each other. Sad because I knew how much Rachel was going to miss her sister when she was gone. 10 months after we found out Elena was sick, something happened that I'll never forget. It was around 2 o'clock in the morning and I was asleep on the cot next to Elena's bed. She said my name and I woke up immediately. I thought something was wrong, that she was in pain or needed her medicine, but she just wanted to talk. She told me she'd been lying there awake thinking. She said she wasn't scared of dying. She was scared of leaving me behind all by myself. She made me promise her something. She made me promise that after she was gone, I wouldn't shut everyone out. She made me promise I'd keep living a real life, not just going through the motions like a robot. She made me promise I'd let people care about me and help me. I promised her even though I didn't know how I could possibly keep that promise. How was I supposed to keep living when the person who made my life worth living was going away? I didn't have an answer to that question. But I promised her anyway because that's what she needed to hear. 3 days before Elena died, we were in the hospital. She couldn't stay at home anymore because she needed too much medical care. The hospital room was full of machines that beeped and buzzed all the time. There were tubes and wires everywhere, all connected to Elena somehow. I sat in a chair next to her bed, holding her hand like I always did. She'd been sleeping a lot for the past few days. The doctors said that was normal. Her body was shutting down and she needed rest. But that afternoon she opened her eyes and looked right at me. Really looked at me, like she was seeing me for the first time. And then she smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a small one. But it was real. She lifted her hand just a tiny bit and I held it with both of mine. Her voice was so quiet I had to lean in close to hear her. She said, "Finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me." I told her not to talk like that she was going to be okay, that we still had time. But we both knew I was lying. She closed her eyes and went back to sleep. That was the last time I saw her smile. 2 mornings later, my phone rang early. Really early. It was still dark outside. I looked at the screen and saw it was the hospital calling. My heart started beating so fast. I answered and heard a nurse's voice on the other end. She sounded gentle and kind when she said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Chan. Elena passed away about half an hour ago." It was very peaceful. She wasn't in any pain. I don't remember what I said back to her. I think I just hung up the phone. I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed we'd shared for years, and I stared at the wall. Couldn't cry. Couldn't move. I just sat there as the sun started coming up outside the window, and I understood that everything I'd known, everything I'd built my life around, was gone. The funeral happened 6 days after Elena died, but those 6 days felt like they happened to someone else. I don't remember most of it, just bits and pieces. The phone never stopped ringing. People kept showing up at my door with casseroles and pasta dishes and things I couldn't imagine eating. My house filled up with food while I couldn't swallow a single bite. Rachel came over and helped me pick out what Elena would wear and what music should play and what flowers we should have. I couldn't make those decisions. Every time I tried to think about it, my brain just stopped working. The funeral home was packed with people. Way more people than I expected. There were friends from college I hadn't seen in years. People who worked with Elena at the museum. Neighbors from our street. Some people I'd never even met before. Everyone wore dark clothes and talked in whispers like they were in a library. I stood near the front of the room shaking hands with people I didn't recognize. They'd hug me and say things like, "I'm so sorry," and "She was such an amazing person," and "She's in a better place now." I must have said, "Thank you," about 1,000 times. But I don't remember any of their faces. The service started and a man I barely knew talked about Elena's life. He mentioned how kind she was and how much she loved art and how bright her spirit was. Then people started getting up to share stories about her. Her college roommate told a funny story about a road trip where they got lost and ended up in a tiny town in the middle of nowhere. Elena's boss from the museum talked about how Elena could make any visitor feel welcome, even the grumpy ones who didn't want to be there. Rachel spoke too, but I couldn't listen. Hearing her voice crack and break was too painful. I just stared at all the flowers around the casket and tried not to think about how Elena was inside it. After everyone finished talking, people lined up to walk past the casket one last time before we drove to the cemetery. I waited until every single person had gone. Then I stood there by myself looking down at her. She looked like she was sleeping, peaceful and calm, but she was too still, way too still. I wanted to shake her awake. I wanted to hear her voice just one more time. Instead, I just stood there until someone touched my shoulder and told me it was time to leave. At the cemetery, I watched them lower the casket into the ground. That's when it really hit me. This was real. Elena was actually gone. She wasn't coming back. I'd never hear her laugh again. I'd never smell her lavender shampoo. I'd never hold her hand. The rest of my life stretched out in front of me, and it looked empty and dark, and I had no idea how I was supposed to fill it. People started walking back to their cars. Some of them were going to a restaurant nearby for food and more talking. I couldn't do that. I couldn't sit in a room eating sandwiches and pretending this was just a normal gathering. I was about to get in my car when Rachel walked up to me. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying. She looked exhausted. She put her hand on my arm and said something I didn't expect. "Daniel," she said quietly, "Elena told me not to let you be alone. She knew this day was coming, and she made me promise I'd look after you." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her I didn't need anyone looking after me, that I was fine. But that would have been a lie. I just nodded and walked away. I got in my car and drove home without saying another word to anyone. Walking into my house felt wrong. Everything looked the same, but it all felt different. Colder. Emptier. Elena's jacket was still hanging by the door. Her shoes were lined up in the closet. Her coffee mug was in the sink from the last morning she was home before going to the hospital. I picked up that mug and held it. There was a small chip on the handle from when she'd dropped it about a year ago. She'd laughed about it and said it gave the mug personality. I stood there holding it for a long time before I finally set it back down. I walked through the house room by room. In our living room, her books were still on the shelf. In our bedroom, her pillow still had the shape of her head pressed into it. In the bathroom, her toothbrush was next to mine in the holder. Everywhere I looked, I saw pieces of her. Reminders that she'd lived here, that this had been our home together. Now it was just my house. Just me alone with too many rooms and too many memories. That first night by myself was terrible. I lay in bed staring up at the ceiling. The house made all these creaking and settling noises that seemed too loud in the quiet. I rolled over to Elena's side of the bed and put my face in her pillow, trying to smell her shampoo. But the smell was already fading. I didn't cry. I just lay there feeling completely hollow inside, like someone had reached into my chest and scooped out everything important. I didn't get out of bed the next day until the afternoon. What was the point? I had nowhere I needed to be, nothing I needed to do. I finally got up because I was thirsty. I went to the kitchen and just stood there staring at the refrigerator. Rachel had filled it with food before the funeral, but I wasn't hungry. I drank some water and went back to bed. Days started blurring together. Sometimes I'd wake up and forget for just a second that Elena was gone. Then I'd remember, and it felt like finding out all over again. My boss called asking when I'd come back to work. I told him I needed more time. Friends sent me text messages. I didn't answer any of them. My mom called every single day. I let it go to voicemail every single time. I didn't want to talk to anyone. What would I even say? But Rachel didn't give up. She started showing up at my house every few days. She'd knock on the door and wait until I answered. Sometimes she brought groceries. Sometimes she brought dinner she'd already cooked. She'd let herself in, put everything away, and try to talk to me about normal stuff. I barely said anything back. I know I was being rude, but I couldn't help it. I didn't want her there. I didn't want anyone there. About 5 weeks after the funeral, Rachel showed up with 2 cups of coffee. She didn't even ask if she could come in. She just walked right past me into the house and set the cups on the table. "Put your shoes on," she said. "We're going for a walk." I looked at her like she was crazy. "I don't want to go for a walk." "I don't care what you want," she said. "You've been locked up in this house for weeks. You need to get outside. Now put on your shoes." Something in her voice reminded me of Elena. That same stubbornness. That same way of not taking no for an answer. So I put on my shoes and we walked to the park a few blocks away. It was a nice day, warmer than it had been. Trees had new leaves growing. Families were out with their kids. Dogs were running around playing. Normal people doing normal things. I felt like an alien watching them from another planet. We walked without talking for a while. Rachel didn't try to force conversation, and I was glad for that. But then she stopped on the path near the water and turned to look at me. "You're punishing yourself," she said. And Elena wouldn't want that. I felt anger rush through me for the first time in weeks. "You don't know what Elena would want." "Yes, I do," Rachel said quietly. "She was my sister. We talked about everything. She told me she was worried about you. She was scared you'd blame yourself for not saving her. She was scared you'd lock yourself away and stop living. She made me promise not to let that happen." I wanted to argue with her, but the words got stuck. Because Rachel was right. I had been blaming myself, wondering if I'd seen the signs earlier. If I'd forced her to go to the doctor sooner, would it have made a difference? If I'd found better doctors or better treatments, maybe she'd still be here. The guilt sat on me like a heavy weight I couldn't lift off. "You couldn't have saved her," Rachel said, and tears filled her eyes. "Nobody could. The doctors told us that. This wasn't your fault. You gave her everything. You loved her completely. That's all anyone could have done." Something broke inside me right there on that path with strangers walking past us. I started crying. Not quiet tears, but real sobbing that shook my whole body. Rachel wrapped her arms around me and let me fall apart. I cried for Elena. I cried for our future that would never happen. I cried until I had nothing left. And Rachel just held on tight. After that day in the park, things shifted between Rachel and me. I started letting her come over more. She'd stay longer instead of just dropping off food and leaving. We'd sit on my porch and talk about regular stuff. Her job teaching elementary school. Funny things her students said. I told her about a project I was working on. I'd gone back to work part-time because staying busy helped keep my mind from going to dark places. One Saturday, Rachel showed up with a bunch of cleaning supplies. "We're cleaning out the garage today," she announced. I'd been avoiding the garage for months. It was full of boxes we never unpacked when we moved in, plus all of Elena's art supplies and half-finished projects. I wasn't ready to face all that. But Rachel was already heading out there, so I followed her. We spent hours going through everything. Some stuff we threw away. Some stuff we put in boxes for donation. It was hard touching Elena's things, seeing her handwriting on labels, finding paintings she'd started but never finished. But having Rachel there made it easier somehow. She'd pull something out and tell me a story about it. We'd laugh and cry at the same time. Then Rachel found a shoebox full of old photographs. Pictures from a beach trip Elena and I took 3 years ago. We'd rented a little cabin for the weekend and spent the whole time walking on the sand and eating seafood. Elena was smiling in every single picture. Her hair was blowing in the wind. She looked so alive and happy. Rachel sat down right there on the garage floor and started looking through them. "You two were perfect together," she said softly. "Elena talked about you constantly. Even when she was really sick and scared, she'd tell me how lucky she was to have found you." I sat down next to her looking at the photos. "I was the lucky one." "You both were," Rachel said. And when she looked up at me, something in her eyes made my heart beat faster. We were sitting really close together, surrounded by dust and boxes and memories. I could smell her perfume. Her shoulder was almost touching mine. Our eyes met and held. Time seemed to stop. I felt something I hadn't felt since before Elena got sick. A pull toward another person. Connection. It scared me so much that I looked away fast. My face felt hot with shame and confusion. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, standing up. "I need some water." I basically ran into the house, leaving Rachel sitting there. My hands were shaking as I filled a glass at the sink. What was wrong with me? Elena had only been gone a few months, and here I was feeling something for her sister. It felt like the worst possible betrayal. I leaned against the counter trying to calm down. Rachel came inside a few minutes later. She didn't say anything about what happened. She just started putting the photos we'd found into a new box, organizing them carefully. But the air between us felt different now, charged with something neither of us wanted to name. She left pretty soon after that, saying she had errands to run. After she was gone, I sat on the couch and put my head in my hands. I felt guilty and confused and angry at myself. Elena was the love of my life. How could I feel attracted to someone else so fast? And her sister, of all people, felt completely wrong. But that night in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the garage. The way Rachel had looked at me, the way my heart had responded. I said Elena's name out loud into the darkness and asked her to forgive me. Even though nothing had happened, nothing would happen. I wouldn't let it. The next few weeks, Rachel still came by, but things felt awkward between us. We were both pretending that moment in the garage didn't happen, but it hung there between us like smoke. Our conversations became more careful. We didn't sit as close. When our hands accidentally touched reaching for the same thing, we both pulled back too quickly. One evening Rachel brought over dinner and we sat at my kitchen table eating. Halfway through, she put down her fork and looked at me. "We need to talk about what happened in the garage." My stomach dropped. "Nothing happened. Daniel, please, don't pretend." I felt it too. I pushed my plate away. "It doesn't matter what either of us felt. It's wrong. You're Elena's sister." "I know who I am," Rachel said quietly. "And I know how messed up this is. But ignoring it isn't making it go away. I think about you all the time. I look forward to coming here. And I don't think it's just because I promised Elena I'd check on you." I walked to the window and looked out at the street. I loved her. I still love her. "I know you do. So do I. She was my sister and I miss her every day. But Daniel, she's gone. We're still here. Is it really so terrible that two people who both loved her might find comfort in each other?" I turned around. What would people say? What would her parents think? "I don't know," Rachel said with tears in her eyes. "But I can't keep pretending I don't feel this." She left after that and I stayed awake all night thinking about her words. 3 months went by. Rachel and I kept seeing each other, but we were careful, dancing around feelings neither of us wanted to admit. Then one night Rachel called me. Her voice sounded strange, nervous. She asked if she could come over. She needed to talk to me about something important. When she arrived, she looked pale and worried. We sat in my living room and she twisted her hands together. "I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. I'm pregnant." The room spun.
Ist her.
"What?"
I'm pregnant.
"It's yours." From that night 2 months ago when we both drank too much wine and we made a mistake we said we'd never mention again. Except now we have to mention it because I'm pregnant. I remembered that night. We'd been watching a movie and drinking wine and one thing led to another. The next morning we'd both been horrified. We agreed it was a mistake. We promised to forget it happened. Except now there was going to be a baby. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I've taken 4 tests. I went to the doctor. I'm sure." I stood up and paced across the room. My mind was racing. A baby. Rachel was having my baby. Elena's sister was having my baby less than a year after Elena died. People would judge us. They'd say we disrespected Elena's memory. Her parents would hate us. "What do you want to do?" I asked. Rachel looked up at me with tears on her face. "I want to keep it. I know that makes everything harder. But I want this baby. I understand if you don't want to be involved. I can do this alone." "No," I said immediately. "No, you can't. I mean, you shouldn't have to. If we're doing this, we do it together." Rachel moved into my spare bedroom. We told people we were living together because we'd gotten close while grieving Elena. We left out the part about the baby being mine until we couldn't hide it anymore. When Rachel started showing, we sat down with her parents and told them everything. Her mother cried. Her father wouldn't look at me. They said we'd betrayed Elena, that we should be ashamed. Rachel stood up and told them Elena had asked her to take care of me, and that's what she was doing. They left and didn't talk to us for months. Friends had different reactions. Some understood. Some didn't. I lost friendships over it. People at work whispered when I walked past. But Rachel never backed down. She stood by me and I stood by her. As her due date got closer, something changed between us again. It wasn't just about grief anymore or guilt or making the best of a bad situation. We started caring about each other for real. She'd fall asleep on the couch and I'd cover her with a blanket. I'd come home stressed and she'd make my favorite food. We'd stay up late talking about baby names and what kind of parents we wanted to be. The night Rachel went into labor, I drove her to the hospital with shaking hands. We'd taken classes and read books, but nothing prepares you for the real thing. I sat next to her bed, holding her hand while she breathed through contractions. After 16 hours, our daughter was born. The nurse put her in Rachel's arms, and I looked down at this tiny person we'd created. She had dark hair and Elena's smile. I started crying. Rachel looked at me and asked, "What should we name her?" I didn't have to think.
Elena.
"Her name is Elena." Rachel nodded, crying too. She kissed the baby's head and whispered, "Hi, Elena. We've been waiting for you." I held my daughter for the first time and made promises to her. I told her I'd love her with everything I had. I told her about the amazing woman she was named after. I told her that even though her story started in a complicated way, she was wanted and loved more than anything. Rachel and I never got married. We talked about it, but it never felt necessary. We built a real life together as a family. Our daughter is 3 years old now. Some days are still hard. Sometimes the guilt creeps back in and I wonder what Elena would think. But then I look at our daughter laughing or sleeping or reaching for me with her tiny hands, and I know this is right. Not in a simple way or an easy way, but right. I still miss Elena every day. I probably always will. But I've learned that your heart can hold both sadness and happiness at the same time. Moving forward doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means carrying love with you into whatever comes next.